Today is Wednesday, July 2, 2014, the 183rd day of the year. There are 182 days remaining until the end of 2014. Sunrise today is at 5:11 a.m. The sun sets at 8:38 p.m. Length of daylight hours today, 15 hours, 26 minutes, 47 seconds. That's 45 seconds fewer than yesterday. Tomorrow will be 49 seconds shorter than today. The waxing crescent moon rises today at 9:39 a.m. with 23.1% illumination and sets at 11:48 p.m. The moon passes today above downtown Rutland City at 251,619 miles distant from the center of planet Earth within the 6th zodiacal designation, Virgo, the Virgin. Today's the midpoint of the year because there are 182 days before and 182 days after today. The exact time of the middle of the year is noon in countries that use daylight savings time as we do. The actual exact time of the midpoint this year is 1 p.m. This is when 182 days and 12 hours have elapsed, and there are 182 days and 12 hours remaining. On this day in 1504, Bogdan the One-Eyed becomes Voivode of Moldavia. Wonder why they call him that. He's married to Stana, Nastasia, and finally to Roxanne. What the hell? He's the voivode. He can do anything he wants. Funny story. He wants to marry Elizabeth, who's the sister of the Polish king, Alexander the Jagiellonian. But twice he's refused, despite his offer of very generous gifts, including territory, which is hard-won these days because of a tight real estate market. Alexander doesn't much care for his looks, that whole one-eyed business, and Elizabeth, classy in that late 15th, early 16th century way, is none too keen on him either. So what does Bogdan do? He's the voivode. He invades southern Poland, conquers the heck out of it, carries off 74,000 slaves, including the lovely Elizabeth, who's never heard from again. On this day in 1881, disgruntled office seeker Charles Julius Guiteau shoots and fatally wounds U.S. President James A. Garfield, who eventually dies September 19 from infection. The assassin, Charles Guiteau, has a sketchy past, not much good at school. He later, still a young man, inherits $1,000 from his grandfather, a hefty sum of money in the mid-19th century, which he blows in New York trying to get into college. The chicks don't dig him, and he's bitter about it. His father thinks he's a little crazy. He joins a religious commune, Oneida community, where they have this group marriage thing going on. But the women there reject him too. Seems to be a pattern, maybe something to do with personal hygiene. Since he can't make it with women, he figures he can do better with God, so he turns to religion. When it turns out God doesn't dig him any more than the women do, which is pretty much straight no thanks, he turns to politics and writes a speech, which he goes around town reading on street corners in support of President Grant. When James A. Garfield gets the Republican nomination in 1880, Guiteau takes the Grant speech, crosses out Grant's name, and writes in Garfield's name. Same speech, just the names are changed. You can see why he fails at school. Here's the point. When Garfield wins, Guiteau figures it's because of the great speech he's written. He goes to Washington to get a job in the new administration, which he figures the Republicans owe him. But guess what? First the chicks, then God, now the Republicans. Guiteau decides he's going to kill Garfield, but being the loser he is, he doesn't have the money to buy a gun. He borrows $15 from this guy, Maynard, which he promises to pay back. He doesn't know anything about guns except that to kill the president, he probably needs a large caliber something. He decides on a .452 Webley caliber British Bulldog pistol. Hell of a kick. And then he has to choose between wooden grips or ivory grips. He chooses the ivory because he thinks it would look much classier in a museum someplace after the assassination. When it turns out he doesn't have the extra dollar for the ivory grips, the gun seller drops the price. Nice guy. On July 2, 1881, Guiteau lays in wait. He'd have done it sooner, but he reads in the paper that Garfield's wife is in poor health and he doesn't want to upset her while she's laid up. Guiteau is down at the Baltimore and Potomac train station there in D.C. getting his shoes shined, and in comes Garfield with his wife, just looking forward to a nice 4th of July weekend at the beach. What's the only freaking thing this Guiteau loser succeeds at in his whole freaking life? People used to, back in the olden days, they carry paperback books around so there'd always be something to read, and there are bestsellers that everyone's reading at once. Now we have these smartphones. It's the same deal. Yesterday, here in the Literary Tradition Department, we meet Roxanne McCrae in the first episode of Roxanne, Company Nurse by Zillah K. MacDonald. That's not the original title of the book, by the way. When it was first published in 1957, it's Roxanne, Industrial Nurse. But by the time it gets around to paperback, the publisher fixes up the title. It has a great cover, too. In yesterday's episode, we learned that it's 2:30 in the afternoon. Roxanne is observing a plasma drip on the accident ward at New York's St. Agatha's Hospital. A graduate of 18 months, Roxanne is working as float nurse in the big hospital. The work has its advantages and disadvantages. A float goes here, there, everywhere as she's needed. The continual change of scene is exciting. Already she knows many things about St. Agatha's that even the oldsters among the personnel don't know. But on the other hand, she finds herself working each day with new personnel and new patients. There's no continuity of care. Her life is like dipping into a series of exciting stories, the endings of which you never learn. Satisfied that everything about the patient is all right, she's moving off to other duties when a shadow falls upon her. Bertie, the day supervisor, has entered the ward. In a quick look around, her eyes seek and find Roxanne. She starts down the ward toward her. Roxanne's heart sinks. A sense of coming disaster shakes her. It can't be. It can't possibly happen again. Not to her. Ernest Hemingway writes, "They wrote in the old days that it's sweet and fitting to die for one's country. But in modern war, there's nothing sweet nor fitting in your dying. You will die like a dog for no good reason." From Rutland, Vermont, this is Richard Alcott speaking.